The stars outside the great glass dome of the Interstellar Academy glowed like endless lanterns. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went every day, bringing students who carried with them the pride of their species. Some were tall and covered in scales, others small with glittering wings. Some spoke in deep, rumbling voices, while others had musical tones that echoed like songs. Among this sea of brilliant and strange beings was one student who did not shine at all. Her name was Lyra, and she belonged to the Saren people, a quiet race known only for soft voices, delicate frames, and their skill in healing. They were not warriors, not builders of machines, and not feared by anyone. Because of this, the galaxy rarely respected them. Lyra sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, her tray untouched. She had long, silver-blue hair that fell over her shoulders like silk, and her eyes were large and bright, though usually cast down at the floor. She tried to eat quickly, but every few minutes a shadow would fall over her. "Still eating like a bird, Saren?" sneered a heavy-set student from the Kravak species, his thick armor-like skin gleaming under the lights. His friends laughed behind him. "Careful, or the wind might blow you away." Lyra pressed her lips together and said nothing. She had learned long ago that answers only brought more trouble. The Kravak student reached forward and flicked her tray, spilling her food. The laughter grew louder, echoing across the cafeteria. Other students turned their heads for a moment, then quickly looked away. No one ever stepped in. Why should they? It was only Lyra, the fragile one, the easy target. Her cheeks burned, but she quietly gathered her food back onto the tray. Her hands trembled, though she fought hard not to let the bullies see it. Her people believed in patience, in silence, in letting storms pass. But sometimes storms never passed at all. That night, when she returned to her small dorm room, she sat on the bed and stared out the window at the stars. They looked so free, so far away from her troubles. She whispered softly to herself, "Just one more day. Just keep going one more day." But deep inside, her heart ached. She did not know how many more days she could keep enduring. The next morning, the Academy's main hall was filled with chatter. A new student had arrived. It was always exciting when a new species joined the Great Academy. Students craned their necks, whispering and pointing. Lyra kept to the back, her books clutched tightly against her chest. She expected some large, powerful being, another warrior or genius from a respected race. But what she saw made her blink in surprise. The newcomer was human. He was not the tallest in the hall, nor the strongest. His frame was lean compared to the Kravak or the armored Zulkan species. His skin was a warm shade, his hair dark, and his eyes sharp with quiet confidence. He walked forward without hesitation, though whispers followed him. Another human? What can they do? Not very strong. Not very fast either. They don't belong here. Humans were still newcomers to galactic society. Many races did not yet take them seriously. They had small colonies, a few fleets, but nothing that truly frightened the galaxy. Still, the boy did not seem to notice the whispers. He carried himself as if the weight of their judgment meant nothing. His name, as announced by the head instructor, was Daniel Carter. Lyra's gaze followed him longer than she meant to. Something about the calm way he walked caught her attention. He looked neither proud nor afraid, only steady. For the rest of the morning, Lyra tried to keep her focus on lessons. But during the break, trouble found her again. She had just left the library when the same Kravak student blocked her path. His friends stood around him, smirking. "Still hiding in your books, little Saren?" he mocked. "Maybe the words will protect you when danger comes." Lyra lowered her head. "I just want to pass." The Kravak student laughed. "Pass, you'll never pass. You're too weak, too soft. Why don't you just go back to your tiny world?" He shoved her lightly against the wall. It was not enough to hurt, but enough to humiliate. His friends laughed again. Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. She wished, just for once, that someone, anyone, would tell them to stop. But no one ever did, except this time someone did. "Hey," came a calm voice from down the hall. "Why don't you leave her alone?" The laughter faded. The Kravak student turned his head. Standing a few steps away was Daniel, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. He wasn't smiling, but neither did he look angry. He looked certain, as if he already knew what was right. The Kravak sneered. "And who are you? Another fragile one to protect her?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, just someone who doesn't like cowards." A silence spread through the corridor. The word stung sharper than any weapon. The Kravak student bristled, his armored skin shifting. his friends murmured nervously. They had not expected resistance, especially not from a human. For a moment it seemed a fight might break out. But Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked, steady, unafraid. Something in his stance made the Kravak hesitate. Humans were strange, unpredictable. They were not the strongest, but stories whispered that they were stubborn, that they never stopped fighting. With a growl, the Kravak stepped back. "Not worth my time," he muttered, waving his friends along. The group walked away, though their laughter was weaker now. Lyra stood frozen, clutching her books to her chest. She had never seen anyone stand up for her before, not once. She looked at Daniel, unsure what to say. He gave a small smile. "You okay?" Lyra's voice shook. "Yes, thank you." He shrugged lightly as if it were nothing. "Don't thank me. You didn't deserve that." For a moment their eyes met, and for the first time since she had entered the academy, Lyra felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. The next few days at the Interstellar Academy felt different for Lyra. For the first time, someone had stepped forward when the bullies came. The memory of Daniel's steady voice, calm, firm, and unafraid, echoed in her thoughts whenever she sat alone in class or walked through the crowded halls. She had grown used to being invisible. She thought it was safer that way, but now it seemed she wasn't invisible anymore. Daniel did not act like the other students. He didn't surround himself with friends from his own species, nor did he show off his skills like the stronger races. Instead, he moved quietly through the academy, his eyes sharp, watching more than he spoke. And when Lyra sat alone at lunch, he surprised her by placing his tray on the table right across from her. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. Her silver blue eyes widened. No one had ever asked before. Most students avoided her table as if it carried a shadow. She opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came. She simply nodded. Daniel sat down and began eating as though it was the most natural thing in the world. For a while, neither of them spoke. Lyra's heart beat fast, waiting for a trick, waiting for the laughter. But no laughter came. Daniel only looked up after a few minutes and asked gently, "So, what's your favorite subject here?" The question was so simple, so normal, that Lyra blinked in surprise. "Subject?" she repeated softly. "Yes," Daniel said, his voice calm. "Classes, lessons. Which one do you like best?" Her hands tightened around her cup. She was not used to anyone being curious about her. "Healing sciences," she said at last. "It is what my people are best at. We study how to mend bodies, how to calm minds." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds useful. More useful than most things here." Lyra tilted her head, unsure if he was serious. "Most students think it is weak," Daniel gave a small smile. "Then most students don't understand what strength really is." Those words stayed with her the rest of the day. The bullies noticed quickly that something had changed. When they approached Lyra in the study hall, they found Daniel sitting beside her. When they tried to whisper insults during class, Daniel's sharp gaze made them fall silent. He didn't raise his fists, didn't threaten, but somehow his presence was enough. One afternoon, the Kravak bully leaned against the wall outside the library as Lyra approached. His smirk returned. "So the little Saren has a protector now. Tell me, human, do you plan to hold her hand everywhere she goes?" Daniel stood a step closer to Lyra. His tone was even, but his eyes were cold. "I plan to make sure she can study without being bothered. You should try that sometime." The Kravak student's laugh was harsh, but he didn't push further. There was something about humans, something no one could quite measure. They weren't the strongest, the fastest, or the most intelligent, but their determination made other species hesitate. After the bully left, Lyra looked at Daniel with quiet amazement. "Why do you do this?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Do what?" "Stand up for me. You don't even know me." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I don't need to know you to see what's right and what's wrong. And what they were doing to you was wrong." His words were simple, but to Lyra, they felt like something rare, like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Slowly, a fragile friendship began to grow. Daniel asked questions no one else had ever asked her. He wanted to know what her homeworld looked like, what her people did during festivals, what kind of food they liked. At first, Lyra answered softly, as if afraid of being mocked. But when Daniel listened without laughter, her words grew more confident. She told him about the crystal forests of her world, where trees grew with shimmering branches that caught the light like glass. She told him about the healing pools, where Saren learned to calm pain with gentle touches of energy. Daniel listened closely, his eyes never wandering. When she finished, he nodded slowly. That sounds beautiful. And valuable. Healing isn't weakness, Lyra. It's something most people can't do. It takes courage to help others. Her cheeks warmed at his words. She had never been told that before. In return, Daniel shared stories of Earth. He described oceans that stretched endlessly, forests filled with green leaves instead of crystal, and skies that turned red and gold during sunset. Lyra listened with wide eyes, imagining such a world. Your people sound different, she said softly. Daniel smiled faintly. We are. Some say we're too reckless. Others say we're too stubborn. But one thing about humans is, we don't like to watch unfairness. We don't always win, but we always try. The words sank deep into Lyra's heart. She began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could learn something from this strange human. But not everyone welcomed this new bond. In the council chamber of student leaders, whispers spread. The Kravak bully slammed his fist on the table. This human thinks he can challenge us. He protects the weak one, and now others are watching. If we let this continue, more will think they can defy us. Another student, a tall Zulkan with glittering scales, hissed. Humans are unpredictable. I've read records of them fighting wars far beyond their ability. And sometimes winning. We should be careful, the Kravak sneered. Careful? They are nothing. I will break this human soon enough. But deep down, even he felt unease. The human's calm defiance unsettled him more than he wished to admit. Meanwhile, Lyra found herself walking differently through the halls. Her steps were still quiet, but her shoulders were not as bowed. She was no longer completely alone. One evening, as she and Daniel studied in the library, she whispered, You know they will keep coming. They won't stop because of me. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then they'll have to deal with me. And I don't plan to stop either. His voice was steady, and for the first time, Lyra laughed softly. It was a sound she hadn't made in years. The days passed, and the small moments built into something stronger. Lyra discovered that Daniel never mocked her mistakes, never ignored her questions. Instead, he encouraged her to keep trying. When she doubted herself, he reminded her, You've already survived more than most. That makes you stronger than you think. It was a lesson she began to believe. The academy was still filled with whispers, and the bullies had not given up. But now, whenever Lyra looked up, she found Daniel's eyes, steady, unafraid, certain. And each time she felt a little braver herself. For the first time in her life, she began to imagine a future where she was not just the weak one, not just the outcast, and it all began because one human was curious enough to sit with her. The bond between Daniel and Lyra grew slowly, like a small fire that began with a single spark. At first, it was just a seat shared in the cafeteria, a study session in the library, or a quiet walk back to their dorms. But with each passing day, that small fire grew warmer, brighter, something that others began to notice. For the first time in her life, Lyra wasn't invisible. When she walked into class, heads turned, not because of her weakness, but because the human was at her side. Some students whispered with curiosity, others with scorn. But Daniel didn't seem to care. He greeted her openly, as if she were no different from anyone else. That simple act, being treated like she belonged, changed everything for Lyra. One afternoon, they sat together in the Academy's garden dome. The dome was filled with plants from many worlds, each grown carefully to survive in the artificial environment. Lyra liked coming here. The soft lights and quiet air reminded her of home. She traced her fingers gently across the petals of a crystal flower that glowed faintly. This flower grows on my world, she said softly. When I was little, I used to hide under them when I was afraid. Daniel looked at the glowing petals. They're beautiful, he said honestly. But I don't think you need to hide anymore. Her cheeks warmed. You don't understand my people. We are not strong like yours. We heal, but we don't fight. That's why others mock us. That's why... Her voice trailed off, the old pain returning. Daniel leaned back on the bench, his eyes thoughtful. Strength isn't just about fighting, he said. Sometimes it takes more strength to keep standing when everyone is against you. And you've been standing a long time, Lyra. That's not weakness. That's courage. The words sank into her heart like sunlight into soil. She had always believed she was weak, that surviving each day was only endurance. But Daniel made it sound like survival itself was proof of strength. For a moment, she felt something new: pride. Their friendship did not go unnoticed. The bullies were growing restless. They had expected the human to back down after a few warnings, but Daniel refused to move. He walked beside Lyra openly. He spoke to her in the cafeteria, and he defended her whenever insults came. One day, as Daniel and Lyra left the library, the Kravax student and his friends blocked the hallway. The Kravax armor-like skin gleamed under the lights, his expression sharp with anger. "You think this is funny, human?" the Kravax growled. "Standing with her, making us look weak?" Daniel's eyes were steady. "I don't care how you look, but I do care about how you treat her," the Kravax sneered. "You're nothing but a soft race. Do you think one human can stand against us?" Daniel didn't move. If that's what it takes, then yes. The standoff grew tense. Other students gathered at a distance, whispering. No one dared to step in, but all of them watched. They had never seen anyone talk to the Kravax this way. Finally, the Kravax stepped forward, his shadow falling over Daniel. For a moment, it seemed a fight would break out. But Daniel's calm gaze never wavered. He didn't flinch, didn't back down. And strangely, that made the Kravax hesitate. With a growl, the bully pushed past and stormed off. His friends followed, muttering. The crowd whispered louder now. Some shook their heads, others smiled faintly. For the first time, the story of a human protecting a Saren was spreading across the academy. Later, as they walked back to their dorms, Lyra spoke in a hushed voice. "Why do you risk this? They are stronger than you. They won't stop." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "Because it's wrong, and because you shouldn't have to face this alone." Her chest tightened with emotion. No one had ever said such words to her. For so long, she had accepted loneliness as her only companion, but now this human stood beside her, steady as a wall against the storm. In that moment, something inside her changed. She realized she wanted to be more than just someone he protected. She wanted to stand with him, not only behind him. The next day, during training exercises, Lyra made a choice. The exercise was simple. Small teams had to navigate a holographic maze filled with challenges. Most students rushed ahead, eager to show their strength. Lyra usually stayed at the back, letting others lead. But this time, when Daniel's team was assigned with hers, she stepped forward. I can guide us," she said softly. The others on the team stared in surprise. Lyra rarely spoke in training, let alone volunteered. Daniel smiled faintly. "Then lead the way," he said. Her hands shook at first as she entered the maze, but she remembered Daniel's words. "Surviving means you're strong." She began to focus on what she knew best. The maze created illusions of injuries and pain to test teamwork. While others panicked at the false wounds, Lyra calmed them, showing where to step, reminding them what was real and what was not. Slowly, the team moved forward, not by brute force but by patience and careful thinking, and to everyone's surprise, they reached the end before stronger teams did. When the results appeared, whispers filled the hall. The fragile Saren had led her team to victory, and the human had trusted her to do it. For the first time, Lyra felt eyes on her that were not filled with scorn, but with curiosity and maybe even respect. That evening, as she sat in the garden dome with Daniel, she whispered, "I was afraid I would fail, but when I remembered your words, I wanted to try." Daniel smiled. "You didn't just try, Lyra, you led, and you showed them strength they didn't expect." Her heart swelled with warmth. She realized then that their friendship had already begun to change her. She no longer wanted to hide in the shadows. She wanted to learn, to grow, to prove that her people's way had value, and it was all because one human had believed in her. But shadows still lingered. In the student council chamber, the Kravax bully slammed the table once again. "This has gone too far. The Saren girl now dares to lead teams? The human has poisoned her mind." Others exchanged uneasy glances. Some were beginning to wonder if perhaps the human's way of thinking had merit. After all, he had not been defeated. And now, the outcast had shown surprising strength. The Kravax's eyes burned with anger. "I will break them both. The next chance I get, I will make sure they remember their place." Meanwhile, Lyra walked through the halls with Daniel, her steps lighter than ever before. For the first time, she felt she was not walking in darkness. For the first time, she felt the beginning of something she had never thought possible. Friendship. And though she could not yet see it, This spark would grow into a flame that would soon be tested by shadows greater than bullies, greater than whispers, because storms were coming, and together they would have to face them. The Interstellar Academy usually hummed with life. Students from hundreds of worlds moved through the halls, their voices echoing like a living symphony of languages. But that evening, an unnatural silence had settled over the campus. Alarms blared suddenly, echoing through the corridors and shaking the walls. Red lights flashed across the classrooms, dormitories, and training arenas. A loud voice boomed from the central speakers. "Alert! External breach. All students report to emergency shelters immediately." Panic rippled through the academy. Students scrambled in every direction, some shouting, others freezing in fear. The peaceful dome that had always felt safe now seemed fragile, exposed to an unknown danger. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had never felt fear like this. Her silver blue eyes darted around the corridor, searching for a familiar face. And then she saw him, Daniel. He stood calmly near the stairwell, scanning the hall with a careful, alert gaze. "Lyra, come with me," he called, motioning her toward a side exit. She ran to him, her legs trembling, clutching her books to her chest. Around them, students collided, shouted, and stumbled. Some of the bullies she had feared were pushing others aside to save themselves. The chaos was overwhelming. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the alarms. "To the lower shelters. Follow me carefully." As they navigated the smoke-filled corridors, Lyra noticed something terrifying. The intruders were raiders, small ships breaking through the Academy's outer defenses. Their figures appeared at the windows like shadows moving in moonlight. They carried strange weapons and wore armor that glimmered in the flashing lights. Lyra froze. They'll catch us," she whispered. Daniel grabbed her hand firmly. "Stay close. Don't panic. We'll make it together." His calmness was contagious. Lyra felt her fear begin to fade slightly, replaced by determination. She realized something important. She didn't have to face this alone. As they moved, they encountered other students trapped in hallways. Some were injured, others in shock. Daniel immediately began helping them. He guided the weaker students, pulled the injured to safety, and directed groups away from danger. Lyra tried to imitate him, using what she had learned from her healing studies to calm frightened students and patch minor injuries. For the first time, her knowledge felt vital, not weak. Then a sudden crash echoed down the hall. A large metal beam had fallen, blocking their path. Panic threatened to take hold again, but Daniel did not hesitate. "Lyra, we need to move it," he said. Lyra shook her head. "I'm too small. I can't." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think. Use what you know, focus, we can do this together." Drawing a deep breath, Lyra used her small frame to find leverage, while Daniel pushed with all his strength. Slowly, the beam shifted enough to allow them to squeeze past. The teamwork was awkward, but it worked. And in that moment, Lyra realized that courage didn't have to mean fighting. It could mean thinking, guiding and staying calm when others panicked. Finally, they reached a central hall where a group of raiders had cornered several students. Among them were the Kravak bullies who had mocked Lyra for months. Now their armor and size offered no real advantage. Fear had replaced arrogance. The lead raider stepped forward, towering above them. He raised his weapon, aiming at the trapped students. Lyra froze, but Daniel stood in front of her. "You'll go through me first," he said firmly. The raider laughed, underestimating him. But Daniel didn't flinch. He had no weapons, only courage and quick thinking. As the raider lunged, Daniel dodged and grabbed a loose panel from the wall, using it to shield the students. Lyra watched, her heart racing, but she remembered her training in healing and agility. "Lyra, now," Daniel shouted. She ran forward, channeling her knowledge of the building's layout and systems. She pressed a panel on the wall, activating emergency barriers that trapped the raider temporarily. The others moved quickly behind Daniel's shield, escaping through the side corridor. It was the first time Lyra had ever felt true exhilaration. She wasn't just surviving. She was contributing, saving lives. Once they reached the lower shelter, students huddled together, shaken but safe. Some whispered about Daniel's bravery, while others stared at Lyra with newfound respect. Even the bullies were silent, their expressions unreadable. Daniel knelt beside Lyra. "You did great," he said quietly. I helped," she whispered, barely believing the words herself. "Yes," he said. "You didn't just follow. You made choices, you led. That's real strength." Lyra's chest swelled with a strange mixture of relief and pride. For the first time, she did not feel like a fragile outcast. She felt capable, needed, and most importantly, alive. As the academy began to recover from the attack, instructors and leaders praised the students who had helped during the raid. Lyra and Daniel's teamwork was mentioned repeatedly. Even students who had once mocked her approached cautiously, offering words of recognition. But the threat was not gone. The raiders had retreated, but their intrusion was a warning. Someone or something wanted to test the academy. Someone or something wanted to see which civilizations could survive. Lyra realized that the bullying she had faced before was a small shadow compared to the real dangers that awaited. Yet she no longer felt powerless. With Daniel by her side, she knew she could face anything. That night, as she sat in the shelter with Daniel and a few other students, she whispered, "I never thought I could be brave." Daniel smiled. "You were always brave. You just didn't know it yet." The words warmed her more than any light ever could. The days that followed were tense. Repairs were made, defenses reinforced, and instructors worked to ensure no more intruders could breach the academy. But whispers of the raid spread like wildfire. Students no longer looked at each other the same way. They were aware that danger could strike at any moment, and that humans were not to be underestimated. Even the Kravak bully avoided Lyra now, his arrogance replaced by a quiet unease. He had seen her contribute, seen her calm under pressure, and seen Daniel fight for her. The experience had left an impression he could not ignore. Lyra walked through the halls with a new sense of purpose. She no longer shrank into the shadows. Her voice had grown stronger, her movements more confident. She began to help other students who were still afraid, sharing her knowledge and calm presence. She realized that her people's way, gentle, patient, and thoughtful, was a form of power the raiders could not break. And with Daniel by her side, that power became something unstoppable. By the end of the week, the academy held a small assembly to recognize the students who had helped during the raid. Daniel and Lyra stood together at the front. Students from dozens of worlds looked at them with admiration. Some whispered, others nodded in respect. The head instructor spoke, his voice echoing through the hall. "Today we have learned that strength is not only measured by size or force. It is measured by courage, by loyalty, and by the willingness to stand for what is right." He looked directly at Daniel and Lyra. "These students have shown that humanity and kindness can be as powerful as any weapon. Let their example guide us all." A wave of applause filled the hall. Lyra felt her heart soar. She had survived, she had contributed, and she had found a friend who believed in her. That night, as the lights of the academy dimmed and the stars outside twinkled like distant guardians, Lyra whispered to Daniel, "Thank you for everything." Daniel shrugged lightly, his expression gentle. "You don't need to thank me. You did most of it yourself." But she knew better. Without him, she might have frozen, hidden, or given up. With him, she had discovered something she had never felt before. Courage that came not from strength alone, but from hope, friendship, and trust. And deep down, she knew the shadows were not over yet. Darker challenges awaited the academy, challenges that would test every lesson she had learned. But for the first time, Lyra felt ready, because now she was not alone. The Interstellar Academy was quiet in the early hours of the morning. The alarms had been silenced and the repairs were underway, but the memory of the raid lingered in every corner. Students whispered quietly in the hallways, their eyes still flicking nervously to the windows, half expecting the raiders to return. For Lyra, the days had changed her in ways she could not have imagined. She had once walked through the halls as a shadow, a fragile, unseen figure. Now students looked at her differently. Even those who had laughed at her once paused when she passed. She walked taller, her silver blue hair catching the soft light, her eyes clear and determined. But the biggest change of all was the bond she shared with Daniel. That morning, Lyra and Daniel walked to the training arena together. Students were practicing maneuvers in teams, preparing for simulations and challenges. The Kravak bully and his friends stood on the sidelines watching quietly. Even they seemed hesitant now, careful not to provoke the human who had proven himself during the raid. "You've changed," Daniel said quietly as they walked. Lyra looked at him. I feel stronger," she admitted. "It's because of you." Daniel shook his head. "No, you were always strong. I just helped you see it." You have courage in a way most students only dream of. Her cheeks warmed. She wanted to believe him, and now more than ever she thought she could. Suddenly, the Academy's central alert system blared again. Panic rose in waves through the corridors, but this time the alarm was different. The instructor spoke calmly over the speakers. All students, please gather in the main assembly hall immediately. This is a controlled exercise. Lyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She glanced at Daniel. A drill? He nodded. Seems like it. But after what happened, I'm sure they want to make it realistic. As they entered the main hall, hundreds of students had gathered. Hollow projections appeared around the room, displaying a simulation of the Academy under attack. The simulation was detailed, showing raiders approaching, traps in the corridors, and students trapped in dangerous situations. The instructors explained that this drill would test students' teamwork, decision-making, and courage. They would face challenges similar to the real raid, but safely. Lyra's heart raced. She had survived the real thing once. Could she do it again, even in simulation? Daniel squeezed her hand lightly. We've got this, together. The simulation began. Lyra felt her pulse quicken as alarms blared and holographic raiders appeared. Other students panicked or froze, but she focused. She remembered every lesson from the raid. Stay calm, think clearly, help others. Daniel led their group. But Lyra suggested strategies, pointing out safer routes, warning of traps, and helping guide frightened students. She felt her confidence grow with each decision. She wasn't just following, she was leading in her own way. One by one, their team rescued holographic students, avoided traps, and outsmarted the simulated raiders. They worked together seamlessly, their trust in each other guiding them forward. By the end of the exercise, their team had completed the simulation faster and more effectively than any other team. The room erupted in applause, not only for their success but for the leadership Lyra had shown. Even the Krevak bully looked at her with something resembling respect. His usual sneer was gone, replaced by a quiet acknowledgement. He realized that strength was not just physical power, but courage, intelligence, and loyalty. After the simulation, the head instructor addressed the students. Today you have all learned an important lesson, he said. Strength is measured not by size or force, but by courage, by compassion, and by the willingness to protect others. And today one student in particular has shown what true leadership looks like. He looked directly at Lyra, then at Daniel. Let their example remind you all that even the smallest, quietest voice can change the world. And sometimes it is the human heart, the courage of one person that reminds us of what we are capable of. A wave of applause filled the hall. Students whispered to each other about what they had witnessed. The simulation had shown them something they would never forget. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and willing to stand for what is right. Lyra felt a warm glow in her chest. She had never imagined she could inspire others, and she had never felt more certain that Daniel was right. She had courage within her, and it had been waiting to be discovered. That evening, the Academy held a small ceremony to recognize the bravery and leadership shown during the raid and the simulation. Certificates were handed out, and students were praised for their teamwork. But the real recognition came not from papers or applause, but from the changed hearts of those around them. Students who had once mocked Lyra now approached her, offering smiles or quiet nods of respect. They had seen her rise above fear, guiding others, making decisions, and saving lives. They had witnessed how a human, someone new to the galaxy, had the courage to stand beside her and show her that she mattered. The Krevak bully approached last. His eyes met Lyra's, and for the first time there was no mockery. "You were impressive," he said quietly. I underestimated you," Lyra blinked. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded and walked away, leaving her with a strange sense of peace. She realized that even the hardest hearts could change when shown bravery and kindness. Later, Daniel and Lyra sat in the garden dome, surrounded by the calm glow of alien plants. The stars outside seemed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was watching. "You know," Lyra said softly, "I never thought I'd feel proud of myself, or that I could matter to anyone." Daniel smiled. "You always mattered. You just didn't know it yet." She laughed quietly. "I used to think humans were small, weak, and unimportant compared to other species. But now I see. You are strong in ways that matter more than size or weapons." Daniel shrugged, a small smile on his face. "We're not perfect, But we try, and sometimes that's enough to make a difference. Lyra looked at him, her silver blue eyes shining. You didn't just make a difference in my life. You helped me see my own strength, and now I want to help others just like you helped me. Daniel reached out and lightly touched her shoulder. Then do it. The galaxy needs people like you. Days passed and life at the academy slowly returned to normal. But nothing would ever be the same. Students had learned a lesson they would never forget. Strength was more than power, and courage was more important than fear. Humans, once underestimated, were now recognized as protectors, leaders, and reminders that even the smallest acts of bravery could inspire entire worlds. Lyra walked through the halls, her head held high. She no longer shrank from the eyes of others. She had found her voice, her courage, and her place, and she had learned that sometimes all it took was one person, one human, to step in and show that kindness. Loyalty and bravery were more powerful than any weapon. At night, as she looked up at the stars, she whispered softly, "Thank you for believing in me." Daniel, sitting beside her, only smiled. "No need to thank me. You were always capable. You just had to see it for yourself." And in that moment, Lyra realized something profound. The galaxy was not only full of danger and cruelty, it was full of hope. And humanity was proof of that hope. Because when one human chose to stand for what was right, everything changed.